Hey, Jordan here. Welcome to episode 52 of the Chocolate Croissants podcast. 52, that's a year. That is crazy. And if you've been with us since the beginning, we are very, very grateful for your support and attention for a full year. What an occasion. And if this is your first time checking out the Chocolate Croissants podcast, which we're expecting, especially due to our guest this week, welcome. If you're unfamiliar with what this is, it is a weekly podcast. And most of the topics with the guests that we're focused on lying in the fields of self-improvement and creative entrepreneurship. I thought our guest this week, James Musselwhite, is the epitome of both of these things that we're so interested in within ourselves and our own creative paths, but also exploring with others. James is someone that I met through Ring of Honor Wrestling. He is a photographer out of the UK, and he's someone who has this classic narrative of having a passion at an early age for photography and working his whole life to realize his dreams of doing it in a way that supports him financially, but also makes him feel alive as in the work itself with the subject of pro wrestling now. We think you'll really enjoy this episode. This week, it's a solo one for me and our guest, James. We actually tried with Matt the day before James and I got this conversation that you're going to hear. But a thunderstorm knocked out his internet, which threw the whole thing into shits. And James was very flexible and kind with his time to make it happen for us this week. Very briefly, Rode Microphones. They are our flagship sponsor since episode 1. Holy shit, what a great company they are. They've been super supportive to us. RODE.com. Right now, I am using the NT-USB microphone. Super simple. I just plug it into my laptop and I can record. But when we do recordings in person, we use the Procasters, RODE.com. Check out all of their microphone options, whether you want to record your voice for a podcast, whether you're recording instruments in a band or whatever it may be. Rode, out of Australia, they can hook you up. So episode 52, James Musselwhite, portraitofawrestler.com. It's a really engaging conversation. He's a really smart guy. He's a very talented guy. He's articulate, and he has a really good mind for building business and relationships long term. I think you'll get a lot out of this. You don't need to be a photographer. You don't need to care about pro wrestling to get value out of this. His tactics, his strategies, his mindset, they are universal for whatever you are interested in and whatever you want to achieve. So it is my great pleasure to introduce James Musselwhite, episode 52 of the Chocolate Croissants podcast. The music starts now. James Musselwhite.
Hello.
You're there, my friend.
I am.
And we've been talking for like the past hour.
Pretty much.
And we talked for about that length of time yesterday, which for those listening right now would have been Wednesday afternoon at the end of March.
We're starting this podcast 2 hours in.
Right?
It's been great. It's flown by.
Yeah. So I know you live in England, and we have really only 60% of the listeners to these episodes are in the United States. So there's a lot over in the UK. So where exactly are you?
I'm down on the south coast in a city called Portsmouth, which is like one of the homes. Well, they'd say it's the home of the Royal Navy. So it was a huge naval tradition here. Down on the south coast. So it's okay. I like it. It's near the coast. I like being near the beach. It's nice.
Oh, you have a beach.
Yeah, we have well, Portsmouth's an island, but it looks like it's attached to the southern part of England, but it's actually, there is water sort of separating it from the land, so it does have an island mentality, I suppose. But I enjoy it. And that's where you grew up?
Not
at all, no. I grew up sort of 60 miles down the road in a place called Bournemouth, which does have a lovely beach. That's 7 miles of golden sand, and it's a beautiful place to go, and I still go back there once in a while. But it's only a short trip just down the road, just to get down here to Portsmouth, and moved down here about, I think, 2003, so I've lived here a while now.
But we met in New York City.
Yes, we did.
We did. So why don't you let our listeners know, why would someone all the way over in the UK be in New York City on a snowy December day.
It was brilliant, honestly. It was. I couldn't believe it. When I landed in New York, it was snowing. It was like what was it, like 7 days before Christmas?
Something like that.
It's 7 days before Christmas. It was the day of the Star Wars premiere, The Last Jedi, and I got to see that in Times Square.
Just to set the mood, I got these Christmas films.
Thank you. And I remember tweeting, I was just like, I wish I could meet my 8-year-old self and just tell him one day you're going to see the premiere of Star Wars in Times Square. Like, and then I saw the movie and yeah.
You're right. You know what? I forgot. So, as people know now by the intro, James is a photographer, portraitofawrestler.com.
Yes.
And the wrestling promotion that I work with, Ring of Honor, will bring you, James, over to our biggest events. We're actually going to meet up again a week from now in New Orleans.
Yes.
For another big event. I forgot that Final Battle, which is kind of like our year-end show, was the same night as the Star Wars premiere, and I still haven't seen that movie.
Have you not seen it?
Was it good?
I think my friend put it best, where he said it's a good movie. It's not a Star Wars movie.
Fair enough. I will see it at some point, but I've done when they reintroduced the series a couple years ago. I did the full premiere at the Classic Baltimore Theater. It was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cool. So we did that, and then we met at the Hammerstein Ballroom, which is like a wrestling mecca, really. So many big things have happened there, and it was my brilliant weekend just continued, and got to shoot the show there, meet all the talent. And then leave Manhattan on a really snowy evening to go over to Philadelphia to go to another mecca of wrestling, the old ECW arena on the corner of Ratner Street in Philadelphia. Mm-hmm. I saw the Rocky statue that day. I had Philly cheesesteak that day, and then just went to this arena and just photographed portraits all day. It was like the best, and you unveiled those the new championships as well. And I was like, I was one of the first people in the world to see them.
This is true, but even before the talent saw them.
Before exactly, we had to keep the talent away. Do you remember? Because we didn't want them. We didn't want fingerprints all over the belts, and we wanted them to be clean for the photography. What a weekend! It was brilliant. Right? Honestly, it was the best.
I mean, I now can put on my resume that I was a lighting assistant.
You were a lighting assistant, yeah. A lot of people get that job at wrestling shows. I can't afford to bring an entire entourage with me, so it's basically anyone with a pair of hands gets roped into holding lights in various ways, which was good. And you took me to a Boston market, and I saw an actual Chuck E. Cheese.
Right.
So excited.
But we didn't go inside the Chuck E. Cheese because you gotta save some more for next time.
I will do, yeah, absolutely.
So yeah, I've never seen Rocky. I've never had a cheesesteak, but the ECW arena, as it once was known, just to give some context for the non-wrestling fans, which is probably 99% of the people listening to this, ECW as a wrestling promotion in the 90s was like the cool underground indie band that you're a fan of, and being so close in Baltimore to it, I had some access to seeing its programming in the 90s. And I don't know, did you ever see any ECW? Because it was dial-up internet at that point.
Yeah, back in the day in the 90s, it was tapes. So you'd get them on VHS tapes. I mean, and this is the bizarre thing about the world that we live in now, is that you would go into a record store 1997, 1998, and you would buy an ECW pay-per-view, a single pay-per-view on tape for the equivalent of $20 and be happy with that purchase. Mm-hmm. And all the online streaming sites have got every pay-per-view that every company has ever done, for half that price per month. So we would have access to those. And I remember owning a couple and just showing it to friends and saying, because you see the mainstream product, and that's one thing, but then there's this super thing here where they're setting tables on fire and they're throwing people off balconies, and it's different, and they swear, and it's just it was just like MTV, but with the volume turned way up for wrestling. We did get it over here.
Okay, very cool. And honestly, I see or feel a lot of similarities between ECW and Ring of Honor, and not specifically a brand of violence and kind of leaning towards sexuality and things like that, but the sense that Ring of Honor has this authentic underground underdog feel to it and a rabid fan base.
You get that this is the difference, is in that a Ring of Honor crowd will at times during the show chant the name of the company. Mm-hmm. And with more mainstream organizations, that doesn't happen.
That's a good way to put it.
So they've bought into the brand and the idea of a family. Like, you're part of the Ring of Honor family if you're going to Ring of Honor, and you understand you're a little bit deeper inside the rabbit hole, I suppose, in terms of like wrestling fandom.
You feel connected, I think, in a more intimate way.
And Ring of Honor go out of their way to make sure that their fans, at events have the best time possible, whether it be the meet and greets or the Q&As or just the experience at ringside, that you get. And those arenas are tightly packed. Everyone's got a great seat. Everyone's got a good view. Everyone feels part of the action. It's non-stop. As soon as one match ends, we're straight on to the next one. It is a great experience.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of wrap up us meeting, I think just for you and I personally, that whole weekend was a great experience just because for different reasons. The Hammerstein Ballroom in New York, which is literally in the center of Manhattan, right next to Penn Station, mm-hmm. And across from Madison Square Garden. And then this what was at one point a bingo hall in South Philadelphia, rough around the edges, but just as historic of a location as a wrestling fan. I think just that 1-2 punch was, even for me, like if the 8-year-old within me could have predicted that would have been my reality many years later, it would have been a special thing to know.
There was no way you could have told me as an 18-year-old wrestling fan watching ECW on an old VHS videotape that my first trip to Philadelphia to that arena would be to take pictures and to be working for a wrestling company. There's no way I'd believe you.
Yeah, it's incredible. And then when I look back on it, it's like, man, on top of all that, I met this dude, James Musselwhite. What a guy.
Carry on.
Thank
you. I appreciate that. That's lovely.
Yeah, dude. So, and I told you, as we, were probably getting ready to part ways that night in Philly, I basically helped coordinate talent for you to take their portraits that weekend.
Yes.
And so, as you referenced, we got some Boston Market. We saw the entrance of a Chuck E. Cheese, and we got to chat throughout our work those few nights. And I told you, I was like, dude, at some point we're going to get you on Chocolate Croissants, because just the more I learned about you and the more I experienced you, the more I watched you work, the more I watched you interact with the talent, my respect and continue to grow, and my interest in you continued to grow. So I'm glad we're doing this, and I'm glad we're doing this in a public forum, because I know that you have a lot of value to add to the listeners of this podcast, whether they give a shit about pro wrestling or not. I don't think the value has anything to do with pro wrestling. In many ways, the value doesn't even have anything to do with photography. But I think that the lessons and the philosophies that you'll share over the next hour or so on creativity and entrepreneurship and networking and really just being a human being, I think universally translate to all disciplines.
That's thank you. That's genuinely thank you. It's very touching. It's a very nice thing to say. Thank you. I hope so. I mean, I do a lot of photography seminars, and a lot of it is under the title of, a portrait of a wrestler or capturing the art of wrestling. And I'll be at a convention where there are people speaking about newborn photography or family portraits or wedding photography, and I'm always, drawing slightly less numbers than everyone else. But the people that come to me, the feedback I get at the end of all my seminars is, I came in expecting you to drone on about wrestling for 2 hours, and I'm so surprised about what I learn and what I can take away and how motivated I am to go out and just do whatever it is I do. Which is so, I mean, I think skills in creative arts are essentially transferable. You know,
it is. You know, I do these Beatwell groups, which are
Yes.
drum-based groups essentially. But what I explain when I work with people, 90+% of these people have never played an instrument, especially improvised. But I'm like, this has nothing to do with drums. This has nothing to do with music. It's just the drum is the tool for these greater lessons and experiences.
and that's a testament to your creativity to find something different, to find a solution to a problem that people have been trying to solve for so long. You know, you have the creative mindset to go, no, I'm going to try and approach it from this angle. And I think carving niches like that is so important.
It's kind of you to say, and yeah, I'll own the fact that it is unique, and it definitely took guts to try to support myself financially. At one point, just doing that, but for me, it was so obvious because rhythm. Like, I honestly can't think of a more universal thing than rhythm. It's in everything, from the individual cells in our bodies to the most celestial bodies in the universe. Everything is rhythm, so it's natural.
It's cool.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really just figuring out a way to effectively communicate that and then market the service to the public.
Well, that's essentially teaching. The best teachers, find the best way to communicate lessons to their students. And there's no one way to do things, to teach everyone everything. Otherwise, everyone would be on the same level. The best teachers I've found are the ones that I react best to, because funnily enough, the people I react best to who've helped me in photography and helped my learning are the ones who've been the most blunt. I can't handle fluffiness, and I can't handle people being gentle and nicey with me. I'm very, as a creative, I find myself, I'm quite objective rather than subjective with information. I like the mechanics of how a camera works. I like knowing that if I do this, that, if I change one setting, I know what's going to happen directly. But then you get artists who are very sort of a bit more laissez-faire, a bit more laid back. And I kind of struggle with that approach. I like to learn things, learn the process of things, learn how things are going to happen, and then try and implement, like that. But
that's probably why you're way more tech savvy than me.
Possibly.
I think it's because even as a creative, and I'll think of when I have a quote performance. So whether it's actually performing music and I'm really just playing the role of performer, or being a facilitator of people and experience, or even this podcast, I am very intentional in what I want to achieve. I'm very mindful about the exchange, but there's a big part of me that, as long as I reach that endpoint, I don't give a fuck how I get there.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And the messier the better, because then it's kind of exciting to me, which seems a bit different from the approach it seems to be more natural for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think I just like to I kind of assimilate what works and what doesn't, and I very rarely revisit what doesn't, if that makes sense.
Sure.
But the journey's half of it. It's half of everything that we do, not just your journey in your work or your life journey is all about making mistakes. Mm-hmm. We got deep pretty quick, didn't we? Blimey.
Yeah, man. It's good though. It's funny, man. It's funny. I often get feedback from people of man, every time I talk to you, can we just have a normal conversation? And I'm like, I don't know. In many ways, it's fun to shoot the shit, but
we've got 2 hours of normal in the can.
Right? Yeah, this is true. Batting around wrestling,
absolutely,
which is just as lovely as well. So I'm curious, James. Can you think of the one teacher in your life that really stands out, and what was the one non-photography lesson or bit of value that you got from that person?
Oh, blimey. Oh, goodness gracious. That is... Oh, I'm thinking back now.
Blimey? Is that what you said?
Blimey. Yeah, that's a very English phrase. Go on,
two ticks.
Yeah. I think 2 ticks, yeah. I suppose my mentor Kevin, who was my mentor for the longest time, Kevin Wilson, who's a really, really high quality, high end classical wedding photographer. So quite different from what I do. He told me that you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Try and use them in that sort of ratio with everything you do.
I use that saying often.
Yeah, so I know it's a well used one, but he's the first one who told me. Off the record, my first manager, who was the studio manager below the sort of like the manager of all of the studios in our region, he kept quiet when I dropped a £1,500 lens on my second day of work.
Wow.
From the top of a ladder.
Holy shit.
And it still made a creaking noise the day I left 6 years later.
Wow.
But he was one of my ushers at my wedding.
Incredible.
So we only met him last week again, just because he's godparents to my kids and all that sort of stuff. But he had so much patience with me in the early days when I didn't know an f-stop from a bus stop, and just patience and learning, and just I was ready to walk that day. I was ready to walk. It's suddenly flooding back to me. I tried something different on day 2 that I shouldn't have done, and I tried to take an image from a high angle of a couple, and I got up a ladder, and I tried to change a lens at the top of a ladder, and I dropped it, and he saw it, and I said to him after the shoot, I said, I'm going. He said, where are you going? I said, I'm going home. I can't do this. I've moved city for this job, and I'm out my depth. And he took me to the pub, and we had a little bit too much to drink on our lunch break, and I came back and I shot 4 more sessions.
Wow.
He was just like, and honestly, it wasn't even like it was an arm around the shoulder moment, but it wasn't like it wasn't a pep talk or anything. He was just like, forget about it.
So for context, what year was that?
2003.
Okay, so that's like 15 years ago.
Yeah, the company can't sue me for the lens because they've gone bust.
Sure. Oh, wonderful. But I think it's important to mark that, because as listeners start to become a bit more familiar with your journey and what you've accomplished, like we all start somewhere, you know, and I think there's a lot of creatives listening to this that either feel like they're in year 1 of the artistic process, whether that's learning guitar or learning how to build a website or whatever it may be. But then there's also others that are in year 1 of trying to monetize that.
Yes.
And like patience is so key, and playing a long game, which we kind of chatted briefly about, or before we started recording this audio. So I guess with the spirit of that in mind, when did photography come to you?
Oh, I was 8 years old.
Okay, so it was you felt something for it as a kid.
I arrogantly thought I could take holiday pictures better than my family. I was 100% convinced of it, and it was from years of looking at holiday photos on slides or on these endless sort of prints just being presented to you. And I remember, I tell the story all the time, but I remember just seeing it was just like a beach after a beach after a hill, and then another beach, and then the sea. And I was just so bored as a kid. And then this photo came up of my granddad, and it was portrait, and it was half length, and he filled the frame, and he was eating spare ribs in a pub, and you can see the mahogany wood behind him, and he's wearing a crisp white shirt because he always dressed up for dinner, and in short sleeves, so you can see his tanned arms because he worked outside. He worked on the airfield. He used to work in the RAF during the war, and he's bringing up these spare ribs to his mouth, and he's got all the grease is dripping down his arms, and you can just see the whites of his eyes just looking over straight into the camera. And all those elements told a story, and it was my granddad in an absolute nutshell. And I was like, that's what you should be taking. I don't want to see. I remember the one was like, oh, this is a picture of your nana paddling in the sea, and you can't see her; she's a dot on the landscape because they're so far away. And I remember seeing that photo of my granddad, and I've still got it to this day. And I'm like, that's what you should be taking on holiday. So I made sure that when that I got the camera on holiday and started taking pictures like that, and then wanted to do it at school. And I was the only student in my year who wanted to do photography. and they tried to stop me because it wasn't in the financial interest of the school for me to do it. And it was my dad went and had a meeting with the headmaster that I thought was going to go terribly, because my headmaster was this small Scottish man who had a fiery temper. And my dad just stormed into his office, and he was in there for 30 seconds. And he came out of that office and he said, "You're doing photography next year."
Wow.
Yeah. But I was on my own, because the art teacher wouldn't teach me, because we had a dark room, but he said, "You got to go and teach that yourself, because I haven't got time, because I've got a class full of 20 students there who are painting and need my help." And he obviously couldn't keep coming in and out of the dark room, because if you're processing, you can't just open the door. So for 2 years, I taught myself.
And at that point, I mean, there was no internet. Nope. So it's not like you could find information or watch videos or connect with others locally or around the world with the same interest.
Nope.
So, dude, yeah, I mean, one, clearly it must have captured you enough to go at it in isolation. But also, just as you described that one photograph, the level of detail and the clarity in you articulating what you remember of it, I can see that it clearly meant something to you. I'm curious, is that photograph public, or is that a private keepsake of yours?
Oh no, it's a private keepsake, definitely. It's nothing I've really sort of. I like talking about it, because exactly what you said there. It does. You build a picture up in your mind of what it might look like, and I like that. Totally,
and because even I guess with my through the lens of branding and building businesses, I mean, like, that's the story right there. That one photograph could be representative of who you are as an artist. Like, that story alone would sell me to want to hire you.
And it is the moment I go back to. Like I said, we used to, and we don't do it now. Like, my kids they don't even look at the photos on my phone anymore. Do you know what they do? They bring up like Messenger, the photography thing in Messenger, and they put a cat on their head, or they make themselves look like a princess, or those little filters.
I used the cat on the head last night.
So they don't even look at photos of stuff that we've done. They just want to look at how their face changes on Snapchat or whatever it is. So, but when I was younger, we had album after album after album. And I just remember I was always looking through them, and loved looking back at photos and the hard copies of them. And they still are the things that you would go to save from your house once your family's safe. You would go after the photos. I mean, our most precious thing in this house, I think, is a photograph of my wife and I on our wedding day. It was the first thing we got printed up from it, and we look at it every day. It's on our wall, and it has that much value.
Are prints available for sale, James?
What of my wedding day?
yeah, I'm joking. So I'm curious. Like, at that point, was it tunnel vision that this is what I'm going to do?
Well, even at that point, it was okay. This was the only thing I enjoyed at school. Really enjoyed, and it was like the 2 hours every week that I got to put a sign on the door that said teachers can't come into this room. So I had a book that I learned from, and an uncle not an uncle, it's a friend of my dad's who used to teach me on sort of Wednesday evenings. He took me for sort of like a couple of Wednesday evenings and just showed me the processing of film and prints, because he ran a local camera club. So I learnt the basics from that, but then the rest of it was all me. The rest of it was all, you just got to go out and find stuff to shoot. And I just knew at the end of those 2 years, I had to have a project ready to present that had to be at a level that no one had helped, that no one had guided me. I didn't know what the level was to pass. I was just here's, pick a subject and produce some art on that subject. And I don't really see myself particularly as much of a creative artist, if that makes sense. I struggle. My wife doesn't. My wife can create something from nothing. She went to art school and she has the ability to sit in front of a blank piece of paper and make something appear and make it brilliant. And I need something to bounce off. I can't sit in front of nothing and create something. I need a portrait subject or an interesting piece of light or, something like that. I need some inspiration, if that makes sense.
So you don't have the vision first and then go find a way to create that through a photograph?
Occasionally, but most of my visions are drawn for inspirations from elsewhere. So I'll see something and I'll think, I'd like to do something. I don't never say that I want to do that, but that's given me an idea to look at this in a different way and do it like that.
Sure.
I need that. I'm not a blank paper guy. I really struggle. It's the equivalent of sort of writer's block, if you like. But as soon as I've got people to work with, that's the beauty of working with the wrestling industry. If we can go back into that, is the majority of the wrestlers in the industry are probably 20s, early 30s. That's the age when you have creative ideas, where you're not afraid to fail and you're not afraid to try things that might not work. And I get to surround myself with them and their ideas. So they see the quality of the photography that we're putting out. And they come to me with, I've had this idea for this. What do you think about this? Then I can tinker with that, and I can twist that around, and I can make that work. And then it becomes sort of like a process where we've both inputted and come up with something that's better than either of our visions. So,
do you prefer the collaboration?
Yeah, definitely. With the right person. Absolutely,
sure.
100%. So, a really simple example, and I know this is stupidly basic, but like we had a young female wrestler who's about to go off with Shimmer and Stardom, and she wrestled in Japan, called Zoe Lucas, and she called me up and said, I need some new promo pictures before I go on tour. I'm going to bring a cupcake to the session, because she comes to the ring with a little cupcake and gives it to a fan.
I saw that on Instagram in the past day.
Right, okay, so I said, no, don't do that. I'll contact a person that I know through our portrait business who makes cakes. We'll make a giant pink cupcake. We'll put your name on it, and we'll do a cake smash just like we do with our 1-year-old kids. And we'll smash your face into the cake, and we'll put it on Instagram Live, and we'll cover you in it and make it all really messy and pull loads of different funny expressions and give you something different. And that is so much more marketable than just having her come to the studio, stand in front of the camera holding a little cupcake. And
it's really not that much different you're doing, but like all you really need to do is just a bit more than everyone else to stand out.
Absolutely, that's all it is. And for the price of whatever that cake was to make, it wasn't that much, and we split the fee between us, because I didn't want her to foot the cost of it, because it was my idea, if that makes sense. And I knew that I'd get some creative bounce back from it anyway. It just makes so much more sense, and it means to an outside promoter who's looking to book her, it tells that story so much better and makes it look like she invests in her character and therefore invests in herself and values herself more, and therefore the promoter values them more.
So I'm curious, because kind of where your current story ends is you're this photographer that a company like Ring of Honor is willing to fly over from the UK and you take on those extra expenses to make sure that you are the guy to document our biggest events. So when did wrestling come into your life?
Wrestling was 2014, and that started because...
Wait, as a fan? No, I'm talking about as a fan.
Oh, as a fan. Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
So I loved it in the really early 90s, but I couldn't get it because I wasn't... I didn't have Sky, and Sky TV over here was the only carrier for the WWE. So you'd occasionally catch like late night WCW around 1991, 1992, but I wasn't really old enough to be hanging around, waking up at midnight to watch it. I do have super early memories of the late 80s and like the World of Sport era, with people like William Regal, a really young William Regal, and Robbie Brookside, and Rollerball Rocco, and Klondike Kate, and all these wonderful people who I've since met, in the scene. So I have super early memories of that. But then I kind of drifted out of it in the mid '90s, purely from lack of exposure, I suppose. And then I remember coming home from a nightclub in 1997. And it was about 2 a.m, and I switched on our cable box at the time, which was carrying Sky Sports, and I watched Triple H versus Mankind in the King of the Ring. And I was mesmerised by Mick Foley and the neck injury that I thought he genuinely had in the match, and the fact that they kept attacking his neck, and the sell job he did on that neck at the end of the pay-per-view, which I stayed up for. I was like, and they said, join us Monday night to find out what happens next. And I'm like, well, I've got to find out whether he's actually hurt or not.
hooked you.
Because I thought he was hurt. And then I watched it on Monday, and then the story arcs start coming in, and you see characters like The Rock and characters like, Stone Cold, and you're like, okay, I'm hooked. I've got to see what happens next week now. And then I'm watching every pay-per-view, and I'm recording them. And I remember staying in Cambridge and like getting my mum to record one of the pay-per-views and then mail it to me on tape so I could watch it.
That's incredible. It's cool that you mentioned, Mick Foley. So for those listening at that point, he was either wrestling under the name Mankind or Cactus Jack, most likely. But I've been a wrestling fan really since I can remember, maybe 4 or 5 years old. This is maybe 1990. Mm-hmm. And I was always a WWE or WWF fan. And I think a lot of that just being more in the northeast of the United States. But every now and then I would watch a bit of WCW, and early 90s, I remember Cactus Jack or Mick Foley, and he was the one who stood out and kind of hooked me into WCW because he felt real to me. Mm-hmm. Where a lot of, especially in the 90s, especially in the WWF, a lot of it did feel more like a storybook or cartoon kind of come to life with over the top characters. But it was the realism, which I think Ring of Honor often achieves, and we talked earlier ECW achieved. It was the realism of someone like a Mick Foley, Cactus Jack, that it made me question, what is this that I'm watching? I'm not quite sure, but I'm intrigued.
Absolutely, yeah. It's blurring those lines, and it's still true even in 2018 that I think the best wrestling happens in that grey area where you don't really know, okay, what happened there, or are they really hurt, or how bad is that, kind of thing. I think the genius of Mick Foley was that he had those sort of 3 main characters, so that when one got stale, he could just change character and just do the next one. And the fact that he was an everyman as well. He wasn't an unachievable size or shape or height. He was all of us. Living out our dreams in the ring, if that makes sense, Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you see that more recently, at least in a WWE, with someone like a Daniel Bryan, where you can see yourself in their story.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, totally. And I think that no one has garnered sympathy from an audience quite like Mick Foley.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm curious, as we kind of start to fill in the gaps, James. So when I asked prior to us doing this podcast and me kind of putting it out in the Facebook group that you would be doing it, you said that you were working in an insurance claims type of role. But then when we chatted yesterday, I realized you were still doing photography in that role. I'm correct in that?
No. That was later on. The insurance claim company was way before. Was the last job I had before I decided to make the jump into photography. One of the first photography jobs I took when I was self-employed was photographing cars that had been involved in crashes.
Got it.
It's a case of, I definitely don't want to do that within photography, but I definitely have to make money. So,
sure.
So you go out, and when it's raining, you get in your car, and for $15 you drive half an hour down the road to photograph a smashed up vehicle, and then you drive home and email them over. But you have to do that because you got a kid that needs nappies and a wife that needs a roof over her head and the heating on, so you have to do those things to get to where you want to be.
So for context, how old were you at that point when you were starting to kind of monetize your photography, but not quite in the way that made you feel most alive? I went self-employed in 2010. So I got my first photography job in 2003 when I was a trainee photographer within a high street studio. Mm-hmm. So I'd basically come in at the bottom rung of the ladder and do all of the the cleaning, the emptying the bins, the greeting of the customers, the making of the cups of tea, the watching the sessions and all that kind of stuff. And then got kind of thrown at the deep end because they had so few photographers because they had a mass exodus before I got there. So I thought I'd stormed the interview and done brilliantly. And
wowed them with my small portfolio of work. But what the reality was, they were just desperate, and they saw that I'd driven sort of 60, 70 miles to go to the job interview and was willing to move as well, to be closer to the studio. And they said, yeah, we'll have him. He looks desperate enough. And, you know, and then you work your way up there. But what that taught me, the job there was like, I learned photography second. I learned people skills first. So my camera was sellotaped on the various function buttons, so I couldn't move them. So I wasn't allowed any creativity in camera. I was told not to move the lights. I was told where to stand with my camera, and I was told if I've got a problem, come downstairs, someone will fix it. So for 5 days a week, I would shoot between 9 and 12 sessions a day. 9 and 12 different families, 9 and 12 different ages of kids and babies and grandparents and God knows what. And every hour it was another one. And you just learn how to talk to people and learn how to, talk to your customers and talk to the people who've got the buying influences, and how to check your ego at the door when you're rolling on the floor trying to make kids laugh, or playing peekaboo, or having a baby throw up on you or be sick on you, or all those things, and that's super important to everything I do. As a social photographer, you can get away if you're a corporate photographer and you're photographing products or still life or artistic landscapes. You can get away with not having those skills, but for me, it's utterly vital.
So and now you've also kind of built another niche outside of pro wrestling, but specifically working with young kids. Is that right?
That's right. So yeah, basically, our studio here in Portsmouth shoots sort of 4 to 5 days a week doing what we call bump to babies, where we shoot maternity images of pregnant ladies and then their newborn babies when they arrive.
When did that begin?
So that began in 2010 when I left my previous employer.
Okay.
Yeah,
so I have a bunch of questions, and I want to kind of get to one here because I think it's a natural time to do that.
Sure.
So for those listening, Facebook.com/groups/chocolate croissants. It's a private group. We're over 1,600 members. And part of what we do there is we open it up to the group to have a say in what they're interested in with our guests. So one of our good friends, Ryan Estenti, he was curious, what inspired you to kind of make that jump? Mm-hmm. Where you're doing something a bit more entrepreneurial on your terms, but you really don't have the comfort or the safety or predictability of what you may have had before. So what motivated you there? And at that point, did you feel you were an accomplished photographer?
Yeah. Okay, I'll take the second part first. I did feel I was an accomplished photographer when I left the studio, and quickly realized how much more I needed to learn. Because I'd trained for 6 years how to shoot one way on one style. So I trained myself to shoot in a white box and to make families have fun, which still predominantly makes me money. But within months of leaving that job and going self-employed, I had to learn how to work in a much smaller space with fewer lights. And then when I wasn't getting customers in, because I had no customer database to attack, I had to work out how to shoot on site, how to shoot on location, how to shoot dance shows, how to shoot products, how to do all sorts of things. One of the things I did was I followed our local MP around, a member of parliament, during the 2010 sort of national election, because Portsmouth follows the national trend. So I don't know whether you have an equivalent state in America that goes Republican or Democrat depending on which president gets elected.
So like a swing state?
Yeah, like a swing state, yeah.
Yes, there's a handful of those that really decide elections in the country.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Portsmouth decides the election, but it definitely follows the trend. So if we have a Conservative leader, Portsmouth will be Conservative, and then when we have the Labour Prime Minister, Portsmouth will have gone Labour. They just follow the national trend. Mm-hmm. So that means that every day during that sort of 3-4 week election, there was rumours that big names, big politicians were going to come down and do campaigning in Portsmouth. And you don't realise until you're around these people how much those decisions are just made on the day. You assume a political campaign over those 4 weeks is planned out and they know exactly where everyone's going to be, but there's so many panic phone calls of David Cameron's going to be down here this day, or George Osborne's going to be down there this day. I'm just throwing out British politicians from 6 years ago. But I got into places following our MP around on that campaign trail that I should never have got into. I got into the Royal Naval, the heart of the Royal Navy base, which is all security protected. You can't get into it without, clearance. But we went in there because the Shadow Defence Secretary at the time had a meeting with the head of the company that builds the aircraft carriers for the Royal Navy to secure what would happen in the event that he won the election. And I turned up in jeans and trainers and a t-shirt, seriously, because I didn't know where we were going. They just said, just meet us here. We don't know what's happening today. Someone's coming down, but we're just following them. So I turned up and I'm in this room. Honestly, we're taken through security, through clearance, up a lift, through a stairwell. And then we're into this room with like this oak polished table that must have been 20 foot, 25 foot long with suits all around it. And they had this 2.5 minute meeting where he just, the MP just promised what was going to happen, and they shook hands on it, and I just brought my camera up and just photographed that moment in the corner.
That's incredible. So one, did you feel confident in that experience? And two, does having a camera give you a sense of like being invincible?
Well, that's a good question. I didn't feel confident at all. I was totally out of place. I was a fish out of water. But I followed that advice. I shut up. You just shut up and you just follow, and no one stopped me. But because I was part of the team, everyone was like, "Oh no, he's all right. He's with us." Because I'd built up their trust over the first week of the campaign, and then I'm asking them to do, setting them up for shots and things, which eventually. But yeah, what's the second part? Sorry. I've lost my train of thought.
So, you've clearly, like, this story, I think, demonstrates that you had intense experience as a photographer that I'd assume would have helped giving you confidence and feel competent. But then really the heart of the question is switching over to more of an entrepreneurial path with your photography. Yeah. Where did that come from? The motivation or even the audacity to do that?
Right. Well, that comes from way back. So that comes from about 2005, March 2005, and I was not in a healthy place physically, and I was on a hospital bed watching DVDs all day, and it was an old ECW DVD. It's an old wrestling one.
Of course it was, James.
Of course it was. But it's the one that has the line, the little monologue from Paul Heyman at the end of it about success and failure. And to cut a long story short, he just says, you can't achieve success if you fear failure. And I must have watched that monologue that night 25 times. I would just rewound that DVD back to that specific point and just watch that minute worth of footage back and back and back and back. And I realized that my whole life up until that point, I feared failure without knowing it, because I made subconscious decisions that kept me in a safe zone, which is why I ended up working for an insurance company on the worst, lowest paid job they could offer me. Because I didn't believe in myself. I didn't believe that I could achieve more. I never believed that I could be a photographer after my experience at school, and I just about scraped that pass when I was teaching myself, but I was told exclusively by the school not to do it in further education. So I believed them, and I failed at everything. All the other choices I made in further education, failed them all. So I left that job. So I left school, and got a job in a supermarket, then got a job in a bar, and then ended up in that insurance company. And like I think I got the photography job because I had a terrible morning in this insurance company, and took a call that left me in pieces, because the person had basically abused me over the phone for the best part of 25 minutes and made it feel like it was a personal attack, which I should know. I wasn't mature enough to know the difference, but I excused myself from my desk. I looked up at the clock because I thought it will nearly be lunchtime. It will nearly be 1 o'clock. And I looked up at that clock and it said 20 minutes past 9. I was 4 hours away from lunchtime, and I thought I'd been there all morning. So I took myself away and just had a little cry on a stairwell somewhere and just made the decision that I may as well fail at something I really enjoy than fail at this, which I hate because I was failing at it. I wasn't even any good at that job. And then they made me redundant from that job. So the company told me that I wasn't valuable enough to do the worst job I could imagine, working on a complaints line for an insurance company. An insurance company that I started on my first day. I was told every customer that calls us is a fraudulent customer, and it's up to them to prove otherwise. That was my training.
That sucks.
Yeah, So that was that point, and then then I get the job in photography, and I'm enjoying it, and I'm doing it well, and then I have a turn of health, have a health issue, and then I see this Heyman clip, and I just realised that I was fearing failure, and from that moment when I got better, I decided, at some point, and I have to pick the right time, but at some point I'm going to work for myself, and eventually the right time came.
James, no pressure. Are you willing to let our listeners know what that bad turn of health was?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah, no, I was diagnosed in 2004, a week after I completed the New York City Marathon, with stage 2 testicular cancer, which required an operation and then chemotherapy for 3 months, and then a further operation because it had spread to my lymph nodes. So I had an abdomen operation.
Wow.
But I was told, day one, there's 2 things the doctor said to me that were really grounding. One of them was, he said, I can't guarantee we're going to get you through this. No, I've never been to a doctor that said I wasn't going to get better. Mm-hmm. For everything you've been to, for like flu or measles when you're a kid or whatever it is, they always tell you you're going to get better. But he said, I can't guarantee that. But he said to me, if you're going to get cancer, and the chances are you are at some point in your life, get the one you've got and get it in your mid-20s. So you're in a good place. And, I didn't fight it, the doctors did. But ultimately, God bless the NHS in this country, they got me through it, and, the rest is history.
So I'd imagine, that has to just completely change your sense of urgency in life.
It makes you realise that you get one shot. And I realised because I was, when you're taking I was taking chemo drugs that required me to stay in overnight for days on end. So you have a lot of thinking time, and you meet people. I remember meeting someone on that ward she was 19 and was given weeks and was so bubbly and lovely and happy because and it's what I've since learned about hospices for children, because I visited one with a view to doing a project which I may revisit, and I was expecting it to be this real clinical, quiet sanctuary, and this children's hospice was it was colourful, and it was noisy, and there was laughter, and it was fun. And I asked someone why, and they said it's because we want these children to have the best of what little they have left. And I, you meet those people, and you're just like, Jesus, I've not got it bad here. I really don't. And so when you come out the other side of it, you realise, I got one shot. And I remember being, like I say, I remember being ill, and I remember taking my chemotherapy drugs, 25 at the time, and just thinking, if the worst happens, this sounds really terrible to say now, but if the worst happens, for a short period of time, some people are going to be super sad. Okay? There's going to be a really small number of people who are going to be really sad for a long time. But ultimately, I've not done anything that would make any imprint, there wouldn't be any footprint, unleft by me not getting through this, because I haven't achieved anything. I haven't met anyone. I wasn't in a relationship. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a house. I hadn't made any waves in my photography, in my business, creatively. There wasn't, sure as hell wasn't going to be an insurance company that was going to miss me. So the whole Shawshank Redemption line, you get busy living or you get busy dying. And I was ready to get busy living.
So, this is the appropriate time to ask, but I mean, even it's almost like, let's save this one for the end, but I'm going to ask it now,
Okay.
because we're here. What would you like your legacy to be?
I would like. Oh Jesus! So I can't think of an answer that doesn't sound hugely egotistical.
Wonderful. Give it to us.
So,
Seriously, fuck that judgment. Give us your truth. Like, what's important that when you aren't here, that whether it's your children, or friends, or the many fans around the world of your work, like, what do you want that legacy to be?
so this is a legacy creatively, right?
Or as a human being?
Okay. Well, no, that stops and ends with my kids.
Sure.
Completely. I've got 2 children, and that completely, they will outgrow everything I've ever done. And if they do that, then that's a testament to what me and my wife have done. And they're everything. But I think creatively, the thing that gets me most, and it's something we alluded to earlier when we were speaking, privately, I got an email from someone who told me they started photography because they saw my work. Just picked up a camera because they saw my work. And that you don't know where that could lead. And I never dreamt I could influence anyone like that. Never. At any point during my career. You're gonna take up what I do because you've seen what I do. From nothing. This is a person who had no interest in photography before. I think that's amazing.
It's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's because whether it was in part due to your cancer, in part due to the inspiration from a Paul Heyman promo. And for those listening who know nothing about pro wrestling, Paul Heyman, he still works in WWE, but he was ECW essentially. And whatever it was, you were able to say yes to what made you feel alive with this photography, and doing it in a way that felt good to you. And I'd probably argue for most people, they don't allow themselves that luxury in the one life they have. So in many ways, you're a leading example. You're an inspiration to others.
That's very kind. I think.
What a gift,
Yeah, no, I think so many people hold themselves back or don't believe that they're. Don't believe they. What was that I said to my friend the other day? And it was something I heard. We earn in life. Yeah, we earn in life however much we think we value ourselves. However much we think we're worth is how much we earn.
I mean, it's all a reflection of the relationship we have internally.
Yes, 100%, 100%. And for the longest period of time, I didn't think I was worth enough. That's a learning process. I think you can't. It's difficult because you don't want to just it's difficult because you don't want to just be one of these people that sort of says you need to go out there and follow your dreams and chase your dreams, because the long and the short of the story is that I am chasing my dreams and I'm doing them now, which is really cool. But ultimately that comes from dedication and hard work. A lot of dedication and hard work. And I don't want to belittle the jobs that I had before I became a full-time photographer, because there are things I learned when I was collecting trolleys for a supermarket, or stacking shelves at midnight for that same supermarket, or pulling pints at a bar, or cooking breakfasts at 3 a.m. for taxi drivers, or going door to door asking for charity collections. There's things I learned down the line that I would still use to this day. And, particularly in photography, I had to put the hard miles in. I had to learn and be willing to be open to criticism from in this industry, so much so, because you get criticized by your mentor will criticize you, or your trainer will criticize you, and then you're trying to sell images to your families, and your families will criticize your work to your face unknowingly, and not in a nasty way, but you can't get protective and you can't get offended by that. You just have to take it on the chin and take what you need to from it and move forward. You need a lot of resiliency, I think.
Yeah, especially when you're really mixing art with commerce.
Yeah, art with the commercial value to make money, and that, like I say, you allude to that a lot of people struggle with that point. It's like, what am I worth? Why should I be charging for this? And we still struggle with it. We struggle with it today with our customers today. But it's not like we're not sitting at a desk crying, wondering why people aren't spending. We go, okay, that's another one. Can't dwell on that. We'll take what we need to learn from it, and try and make sure that the next customer doesn't do that. It still happens to us. It's not perfect.
For me, and my experience, I'm a bit unique in that my service with the Beatwell company, it's not like I can see what the market value is for the type of experience that I offer as a service.
Okay, yeah.
So it's still an ongoing process of, what do I charge? What is this service worth? What am I worth providing the service?
Yeah.
And it was, and at times still is scary to say, this is what I'm worth. And over the years, I've continued to increase the rate, and then, for a period of time, it's kind of like, well, this is my baseline. And if I'm not going to feel any sort of resentment in any process of the work, then that feels good to me.
Yeah.
But it's a very personalized, individualized process as an artist to determine your value and then to ask for it.
Yeah, and there's getting into a business. I suppose you have to pick your hills, and there are areas where you can, I believe, work for nothing, and it's
absolutely
beneficial. So, for an example, if we go back to that election campaign that I covered it for 4 weeks, on and off every other day, because I had no other work. So if I wasn't doing that, I'd have just been sat at home twiddling my thumbs, wondering why my diary isn't full. So I offered my services for free. At the end of the campaign, they offered me money to buy all of the pictures from, because the MP who was going for that seat in our constituency won. So they they saw the value of my work, and they're like, you know what, chuck him a few quid because he's been around. It's more of a pity payment, I think, but also because they wanted a record of her win, which is a really, really cool keepsake. So sold them the digital files to the guy. That guy then came back to me 2 months later and said, I've got a wedding inquiry for you because someone on the council's getting married. So I photographed like a wedding from that. I photographed a girl band from that because the person that was getting married managed a girl band, and the girl band came into our studio and had their portraits taken. There's hundreds of things that I can, it's like a spider's web, but unless you put yourself out there, and sometimes you have to put yourself out there for free in the beginning to get where you want to go.
Yeah, I mean, many people listening to this know that with the Beatwell work, essentially for the first 2 years, I did it for free. But to your point, and this is something that we touch on with some regularity, you understood that there's more potential value than just money. It was either you got the pity payment at the end, in the back end, but you built a network, and you were building a reputation, and you're building a portfolio, an experience, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and also I think as much as it was a pity payment, there was a negotiation towards a price. So if I'd have been the kind of creative that when they said, can we have those images, and that's pretty much how this conversation came about. I said, can you give us those images? And I said, we need to work out a price kind of thing. But if I'd have been one of those creators who said, yeah, have the images, they wouldn't have referred me to a wedding because I wouldn't have come across as a professional, because no money would have transactioned. So they'd gone, I do know a photographer, but I'm not sure he's a professional. We'll go and find a professional who's going to charge us money, and all of a sudden you've lost that lead.
I don't know if I've shared this story through this podcast, but I was once at a training with fellow drum circle facilitators, and I'll never forget the story shared by one of the guys there. And he was offered a pretty significant gig, I think maybe in the corporate space, and maybe he quoted them at I'm just making numbers up now, but maybe he quoted them at $500 for the service. And he got a response. I don't think immediately, but probably within a week or two. And they basically said, we were on board with you, with you as a person, with you as a service. We were on board and ready to hire you until we got the price. If you quoted us at $1,500, we would have said yes. And it was him undervaluing himself that he communicated that he wasn't worth that much, at least what they were looking for.
I have the exact. May I? Sorry, may I trade you off with a story?
Please.
A really recent one, okay, and it involves. There's a crossover with Ring of Honor. I was contacted by a company called Top Man over here. Which is like an equivalent, I suppose, of like a Hot Topic out there. It's like a clothing store for like the early 20-somethings, I suppose, fashion outlet,
I'm
right?
familiar.
So they contacted me saying, we're thinking of doing a shoot with a wrestler in a suit. And they were really vague about it. They said, we've booked the guy, but, whatever. And I'm like, And then Marty Skull, who wrestles for Ring of Honor, contacted me like an hour later and said, Top Man have contacted me about doing a shoot. And I'm like, okay, like a video shoot. Mm-hmm. The reason why Top Man got in contact is because they'd seen the video shoot that I put together for Marty for Ring of Honor and were so impressed by it that they wanted to get hold of the company that shot it. And they thought it was a production company and not me with my camera and my light. So when they contacted me, they assumed they were getting through to a huge production company and I was going to give them a massive quote, and I didn't. And then when Marty eventually, because they were super hot on me doing it, and then they eventually all got booked out of my hands, and Marty was, said, I was taken up to London and we were taken to this massive studio with a team of people. And I was like, And they produced, a video that was better than something I could have produced, but not that much better. And,
sure.
But of course they're not going to book me because they're corporate. They're not going to go for the guy. It's like with the second quote. The second thing of the Wizard of Oz, I suppose. Once you pull back the curtain, it's just like, oh no, the perception is reality, I suppose.
And I think a big lesson in that for creatives that are for hire is do a bit of homework, or at least feel out the client as much as you can, to get a sense of who they are, what they're looking for, not only in the end result, but in who they're hiring, and to use your word, the perception of what they're hiring.
Yeah, absolutely.
So while we're like kind of, I know this all started talking about the legacy of you as an artist. I want to dig into another question by a gentleman who lives over in the UK as well and will likely be editing this audio that we're creating in this moment, Joe Hamilton. So he was curious, was finding your photographic or artistic style an easy process for you? How do you navigate it and eventually decide on what you wanted to produce? Or is it just a big process of trial and error for you?
It's a process. It's a process. It's a process. There we go. Back to the English accent.
Yes.
I tell you, I overdo the English accent. I said this yesterday, didn't I? I overdo the English accent when I'm talking to Americans. I go very British. No, it's a case of like evolving, I suppose, over time, and like different projects have led to different things. When I first, I'll go back to when I first learned, I was just making people jump around in front of the camera, have fun, and making things look as lights and white backgrounds and contrasty and full of color and all that kind of stuff. When I went self-employed, I moved completely away from that because I didn't want to be associated with that brand or that style. I wanted to create my own style. So my style for a whole new project of portraits went black and white on a black background. And then that transitioned into Portrait of a Wrestler. I think the black and white style is more timeless, and my unique selling point, I think, of my images is that I want them to look as good in 50 years' time as they do today. And you can't do that when you're photographing trends in photography. So there was a trend recent, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that was HDR, where everything was super high, contrasty and detailed, and all the shadows were sort of like lifted and all the highlights were compressed down, so it gave this really sort of surreal look to pictures. And it looks completely dated. Go back further, it was taking colour out of pictures. So you'd have all the colour out of pictures apart from blue, so people's jeans would still be blue, like the George Michael video, Faith.
Sure.
Their eyes would be blue, but everything else would be black and white. And, there's a rule in like Photoshop, I think, is like, just because you can doesn't mean you should. So I'm always trying to create images that that look good and will look good for a long time. That's what I want. I don't want things that look trendy or, snazzy or, on trend, I suppose.
So you don't rely on Instagram filters solely?
I don't think I've ever used an Instagram filter. I don't think I have. You feel free to correct me, but I think I process everything in Photoshop and then just literally slap it onto Instagram as I want it to be seen.
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't. Yeah. No, definitely not.
So you're talking about, your style clearly has evolved, but also the subject has evolved. So whether you're doing it with children and families, or for wrestling. So I want to bounce back to another question that Ryan Astenti had. How did you get into wrestling? Because it's a very protective, fraternal community / business / culture that it sometimes can be hard to penetrate. So what was your way in?
Oh, thanks, Ryan. That's a cool question. The short answer is with great difficulty. I decided that I wanted to do a project for the highest qualification you can get in the UK for a photographer, which is a thing called a fellowship. You essentially have to produce 20 really big, large printed images to present in front of 5 judges, who will either just tell you yes or no. It's real old school. You go into like this room and there's these old judges in there and they give you a thumbs up or a thumbs down based on the work you've just presented in front of them. And I knew that the project couldn't just be my best work that I'd shot over the last 10 years. It had to be on a specific project. And being a wrestling fan, I knew I could tap into that. And I think I used to see posters for wrestling events around my town and just think that the quality of the photography on them was just dreadful compared to the quality of the show. It just wasn't a reflection on the show quality. So I started off the Portrait of a Wrestler project with the goal of 2 goals. I wanted to have a picture on a poster. That's all I wanted. And I wanted to make friends with enough wrestlers so that I could invite some of them round to watch WrestleMania on my sofa when it came round, in however long that took. So I just started to email as many wrestlers as possible. And I sent out maybe 40, 50 emails in the first 2.5 months and got no responses. And since then, I've realised why. And it's because they get so many emails asking, will you be on my podcast? Can I photograph you? Blah, 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 blah. And they just don't respond to them because they're not bookings and they're just, people looking for freebies and they don't have time. So I was getting frustrated and I couldn't get into the circle. I couldn't get into the bubble. And then I saw a local wrestler in my newspaper who'd recently recovered from quite an acute stomach condition. And it was just his story about how he was returning to the ring on Saturday. So I rang up the reporter of that piece and I said, my name's James, I'm a local photographer. I'd love to shoot this guy. I don't want his number. Can you give him mine and tell him to give me a call? And within 5 minutes, he called me back. And he doesn't drive, so I had to go and pick him up. And his name's the Fearless Flatliner. And he's a huge guy, like 6 foot and change. And like he's got piercings all over his ears and his eyes and a bleached beard and a bald head. And he works as a doorman for nightclubs. And just the most gruff character you've met and the most wonderful, honest human being. He's just brilliant. And like he had a shoot with me, introduced me to the promoter of the local promotion, which I didn't realise 2 things. The promotion training school it's a mile away from my house. And the promoter for that training school lives half a mile away from my house. So all this time I'm sending emails to people all around the country going, I'll travel to you, I'll pay for your train fare, I'll do whatever, just come to me. I literally had the local promoter and the local head of the training school half a mile away from me. So he came to have his shoot and he said, this has been brilliant, these photos are great. And once again, those first 2 shoots were free and they got the images for free. Because Andy Boy Simmons, who's a veteran of the UK scene, who was the second guy I shot and the head of the training school, he said, I love that. That was brilliant. I'm going to send all my guys down to you. And then all of a sudden, his trainees are coming down with money to have their pictures taken by me. And then I'm getting invited to shows. And then I'm getting introduced to Marty Skrull, because Marty at the time was living with Andy. So Marty, who was a guy on TV that I was watching on wrestling while I'm trying to get wrestlers to come to my project, is living half a mile down the road with a shoulder injury, thinking up this new character, the villain, and bouncing ideas off of me about, do you think this would work? How do you think I should dress? Do you think I should do with the fur coat? Do you think it needs to be white? I think the brown one looks good. And we're literally bouncing those ideas off in our first session. You know, and then he's recommending me to guys in London, and then the guys from London are coming down to see me, and they're sending their trainees down to see me, and then then I contact Progress, and they allow me to go backstage for my second show backstage shooting there, and I'm meeting all those guys, and you just keep a level of professionalism. So when I shot my first show backstage in Progress in Camden in London, my MO was to not get in the way and not make a tit of myself, and just not upset anyone, and do as high a quality job as I possibly could. And that means being quick, being efficient, and being professional. And that's all I wanted to do. So for that first show, I didn't take any lights. I shot in a doorway with a little bit of natural daylight behind me. And it's a project that I've never returned to since. But what I did was I waited until the end of the match. The guys came back through the curtain, and I positioned myself about 10 yards away from gorilla position, which is where they come back through after their match, and asked them to stand for me, counted to 3 in my head, shot as many pictures in those 3 seconds as possible, and then asked them to move on. And I was literally, because I wanted to create an air of realism, so it wasn't a set-up promo, it was these are what these guys are like immediately after the match. Look how tired they are, look how worn out they are, look at those scars, look at the fact that one of the guys in the shots couldn't get a splinter out of his eye because he'd just been hit over the head, with like a wooden chair, and he had a splinter in his eye, but that was those 3 seconds, that was that moment. Because I wanted moments that I couldn't then go back and recreate, they were just moments that happened.
Sure, you're documenting the experience.
Documenting, yeah, exactly what happened, backstage. There's a guy employed by WWE at the moment, Killian Dane, who used to wrestle under the name of Big Damo. He thought I was videoing him. So he cut a promo on me in those 3 seconds. Really into camera. And then I was like, right, 3 seconds are up. He's like, oh, I haven't finished my promo, mate. Did you get everything? I'm like, no, I was taking photos. So then because I wasn't getting in the way, and because I was again giving those photos out for free on social media to sort of say, hey, look at these photos from the last Progress show, that was getting traction. And then when I went back to Progress to say, can I come to the next show, they're like, yeah, of course, because you're adding to the product, and you're not, it's a two-way street. So I mean, I think that's the way getting into wrestling is just to. We've said it before, like, be nice. Don't check your ego, and just go around and say hello to everyone. And you realise at a wrestling show that everyone's the team. There's no hierarchy there apart from the promoter. Everyone else is, everyone else is working together to produce the best possible experience and show they possibly can. And you just need to be respectful of everyone.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're just a human beings interacting with each other.
Yeah.
Like, I think if you break it down that simplistically, then it's like, yeah, no shit. Like, kindness, respect. Like, these things are obvious, but I can imagine many people out there. They have the goal in mind, but the strategy, the tactic, the approach, it's clouded in some way. And look, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I'm not attempting to be everyone's cup of tea, but for me, I at least try to just deploy just respect and understand that, like, no matter whether there is like a social hierarchy of sorts, it's like we all experience heartbreak. Like, we're all gonna die. We all get excited about stuff. Like, we're all human beings. Mm-hmm. And I think it's owning that within yourself, but acknowledging that within the other, that can help just not only make these interactions with others more successful, depending on what your goals are, but just more enjoyable, just a more enjoyable life.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so. And it's just, I think like years of photographing families, and particularly interacting with dads who maybe it wasn't their idea to have the family portrait. They're not that happy about being there. They know it's going to cost them a ton of money. and you're the guy that's going to make them pay that money. I think interacting with those and getting those dads on side is maybe like a skill set that I've maybe learned to use in the wrestling industry, to sort of like to get these guys trust, to the point now where like 4 years later, where they're, I'm providing prints for them for their 10x8s, and they're seeking me out at shows, and they're reeling me with their ideas, and we're working together, and it's now a collaborative thing, rather than me going begging for people to work with, and it's a real pleasure.
It's cool, man. I see one of the keys to your success is that whether it was working with the families in photography and understanding the role of the father in that situation, or whether it was working in a market or whatever, the most mundane of experiences, there's always value to extract from it, and there's always connections to how you can kind of get that value in whatever experience and apply it to whatever it may be in life. Like it's not to be like hippy dippy, but like it is all connected in a way. And at the end of the day, like you are who you are, through and through, like whether it's this experience at 16 or a wildly different experience at age 40, like it's still you and it's still your story. It's all connected in that way. And I think, that perspective at least has helped me, because we often talk about this, but I know dozens of musicians that had some degree of success in their late teens and early 20s, and when that career didn't, quote, work out, it's almost as if they felt like they had to start over without acknowledging or owning all the skills that they acquired along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think in our industry, people really buy people. And people, mm-hmm. like you say, into experiences, and like we try and create an experience, for our family portraits. We try and create an experience. I want to create an experience so that when the kids go home, for the week between when they leave and when they come back to view their images, the kids are just talking about how much fun they had in the session, and when can we go back and see the silly photography man who made us laugh. That's all I want to do, because then they're being reminded at home by the parents about how much fun it was. And so many parents come back and say to us, "My God, we weren't looking forward to that. But that was the most fun we've had with the kids in ages, just having our pictures taken and playing silly games," And then when you can create great images as well and a great product, that then you've got the recipe for success, really.
It's cool, man. For me, I mean, not only is that the right thing to do, but it's also good business, and it's just cool to hear you share your mindset in growing your art and building a career of your art. Mm-hmm. Even for me, it's inspiring. Look, James, I know it's nearing 1:30 a.m. for you on your time.
It is.
There still are a few questions, so maybe
I'll go on if you want, or if you want to cut it, I can cut it. It's fine.
Okay, no, let's kind of rip through these.
Let's go through.
Okay.
Lightning round.
Yeah, man. Let's do this.
I'm going to go and get a lollipop so I can have a sugar hit.
Wonderful.
Go for it.
What flavor is that lollipop, by the way?
It's a refresher one, which is kind of like a candy out here.
What? A refresher?
Refresher, it's called. It's not particularly refreshing, but it's kind of like it's a bit fruity, I suppose. Have you ever heard of Love Hearts?
No.
Love Hearts are sweets that you get in a tube. They're all on like little discs, and they have little words written on them, like "I love you" or "Be mine."
Oh, they're chalk. Tastes like chalk.
Tastes like chalk, yeah, basically like that. I'm eating a lollipop that tastes like sugary chalk.
There you go. Mm. Okay, this lightning round.
Go for it.
We've got Brett Getlin. He asked you, James, which performer that you've worked with was most passionate about their project, and which performers helped you with input on style or direction for a specific project.
Okay. Marty Skull is supremely driven with his vision as to what he wants to achieve, and when we get together, it's like a perfect storm of just really getting that across. He has, and the beauty of Skirl is the fact that he doesn't imitate, and he's constantly evolving as a performer and as a personality. And I remember asking him, so this villain thing, are you a good guy or a bad guy? And he said to me, I'm the villain.
Mm-hmm.
I'm creating a character. I'm creating the villain. You're coming to see the villain. And whether you boo me or cheer me, that's up to you. The most passionate, the most well thought out guy in pro wrestling in terms of a mind that I've worked with is Jimmy Havoc. Mm-hmm. We shot a calendar for him last year, which was based on 12 horror movies. So we dressed him up in scenes from horror movies. My favourite shot from that was Halloween. We recreated a scene from Halloween where the main protagonist is stood sort of just behind a hedge in suburbia, and we found a hedge that was almost identical just outside of London, and jumped him out of a car, put the overalls on him, slung the mask on him, and just quickly stood him behind this hedge, which was in this person's garden. Because we didn't want to knock and ask for permission. We just figured we'd just ask for forgiveness if they asked us what we were doing. And,
right.
And yeah, I shot that picture in 5 seconds, and it was my favourite picture. And I just took so much time over all the other shots in the project. And it was literally a point of we didn't go to this location with that in mind. We were driving past it, and I said, that's the hedge. That's the hedge. Get out. Let's do the shot. So that's great. But Jimmy's mind for the business and mind for the way you hear him plan stuff out and his psychology behind things is mesmerizing. Trent Seven's another one. Trent's got such a handle on what crowds will react to and when. So I've heard him and Will Ospreay backstage going. I'm not pulling too much back here, but going through things and saying they'll pop for this or they'll chant this here, and then I've watched the match and that exact thing has happened. Their control and their way that they know crowds is amazing. And Trent's one of the funniest guys ever. And Will is unintentionally one of the funniest guys I've ever met.
Yeah, I had the pleasure of working with him to some degree with a few of Ring of Honor shows. It's cool, man. But a lot of it's just what's cool about the UK and the culture in general, and what I really respect about it. It seems like you guys are just very contemporary, and someone like Marty Scurll really stands out. And for those to give you some context, at the Ring of Honor show this upcoming weekend, Supercard of Honor, which James will be at, Marty's challenging for the Ring of Honor World Championship. And so he's big time, and probably the first time that I found you, James, was the portrait of him in a suit in an ocean. and I've always been I found him to be so fascinating because in many ways pro wrestling culturally can, I think, be a bit behind of the times, aesthetically and otherwise. And he's someone, and I've listened to him on podcasts, and understanding his goals and his mindset. It's what I really appreciate about him, what I appreciate about you, and a lot of these men and women coming from the UK. It's you guys just feel contemporary and have the finger on the pulse of culture.
Yeah. Marty's always been up for ideas as well, which is cool. I think the sea thing was mine. It was one of the rare times where I actually came into it with an initial concept. You're just trying to. I want to create stuff that people want on their wall. I remember that's still one of the most amazing things to me is when one fan sent me a photo and her entire bedroom wall was covered in my work, all framed. They'd gone to the effort of buying it and framing it and putting it up there. And then fan art is another thing. Like a fan art, the fans, when they tag me in the picture as well as the talent that because I'll take a photograph of someone and then they'll just do their watercolor or their drawing or whatever of it. And it's just like, wow, that's affected someone. That's one of the most endearing things people can share with me, genuinely.
It's pretty incredible.
Yeah.
So moving on in what likely is not becoming a lightning round, but valuable and entertaining nonetheless. Braden Harrington, a cool guy who actually is a contributor to postwrestling.com.
Oh, cool.
He's interested, and as am I. Do you have a specific approach when shooting action shots of wrestlers like a Will Ospreay, as you mentioned, or the Young Bucks?
Cool. Thank you, Braden, for your question. The Young Bucks, my goal is to not get in the way and get hurt. With regard, because you just never know where they're coming from, what they're doing.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people, James, are realize listening to this. You know, when you don't just do portraits backstage. I mean, you'll be ringside in New Orleans.
Yeah,
it's unpredictable. You don't really know what's happening, and pro wrestling is different in 2018 than when maybe a lot of people listening last saw it in 1998. And it's highly acrobatic and athletic.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, I remember on my first night with Ring of Honor, I nearly got kicked in the head by Jay Briscoe, just because he came through the middle rope halfway down, and I just didn't see that coming. And that was like my first match, and I'm like, okay, let's have a bit of a rethink of this. In New York, I got caught in the barricade and I couldn't get out. I was caught during the Briscoes Dudley Tommy Dreamer hardcore match. Mm-hmm. I had the announce table on my left-hand side. I was up against the barricade against my back in the corner, and in front of me, Jay's attacking Bully Ray's head with a cheese grater. And I've got this great shot, and you can see me on camera how far away I am. I use this in seminars all the time, and I'm like, I had no option but to shoot it because I couldn't move, couldn't go anywhere. And I've got this beautiful shot of I can't remember whether it was Jay or Mark, but one of the Briscoes holding Bully Ray's head, just like a sacrificial lamb. It's a brilliant shot. I love it. And that's the beauty of ringside. You just never know what's going to happen. It's all improvised. And like in terms of Kazarian coming around the ring and telling me to sit down. Because I took a knee, and he said, "That's right, you better sit down," kind of thing, and just like that sort of, not being part of the show, but just like it's so improvised and so different to anything else I could ever be asked to do in photography. Which is cool. But look, Will Ospreay, which was the second part of the question, I know I've seen 50 Will Ospreay matches, probably live. I know roughly what he's going to do. So there's certain spots where I know where I need to be and how I need to shoot and what lens I need to use. But I can still not watch a Will Ospreay match and not have my jaw hit the floor.
It's incredible.
The guy is phenomenal. Not phenomenal. The guy is amazing. He's just so remarkable in his natural athleticism. He's utterly fearless. He does things you do not believe could happen. You can't believe the human body can do the things that he does. Mm-hmm. He's so quick. He's such a lovely guy. He's such a lovely guy, and it's just God bless him. He's a remarkable talent. One in a million, Will.
The word that comes to mind in his movement, one would be fluid.
Yeah.
But at the Final Battle show that we met in New York, I liked a lot that he was the first talent to come out that night. Mm-hmm. When the show started proper, and it was one of those. Were you and I together? I don't know if we were. Maybe I was with the videographer. We were getting a shot from the balcony of the opening. Yeah. And to watch him come out, he just was so at ease. Mm-hmm. He just seemed just so natural and just present in his performance and in his movement. And it was really a treat to watch that. Also, I want to give love to Mike Sell, who's one of the cameramen for Ring of Honor in that Briscoes and Bully Ray Tommy Dreamer match that you referenced. He took a trash can to the chest while holding a heavy camera and having the responsibility to make sure that what he was picking up was being broadcasted to the world.
We're all hardcore in Ring of Honor. We're all we're all professionals,
It's and to your point, it's unlike anything else.
It really is.
It's really special. And speaking of wrestlers and Ring of Honor in particular, we are going to finish with a question from Rhett Titus, who works as part of the tag team The Dogs, and someone that you shot a portrait of.
Yes.
In Philadelphia. So Rhett asks, how does it feel knowing that ROH likes the quality of your work so much that, you know, we're willing to bring you overseas to come document what we do?
I'm just trying to take a breath and take it in every time I'm there, genuinely. And that's not coming from a point of like faux modesty. I couldn't have, like, so I go back to the point I made. I started the project in 2014 to get a photograph on any wrestling poster and to have a wrestler sit on my sofa and watch WrestleMania. Within 2 years, I was on a plane with wrestlers to go to WrestleMania.
It's incredible.
You know, and it's, you know, and it, I genuinely can't put it into words, like, in terms of, like, I didn't believe it was happening. Johnny Storm is a wrestler in the UK who used to wrestle over in America with Jody Fleisch back in the early 2000s. Amazing guy, amazing talent. And he's got a saying which is, don't believe you've got that international booking until you're sat on the tarmac on the plane. So I remember my first flight out there, and I remember thinking they're just gonna. I remember going to the ticket booth and going, this code won't work. I'm not getting a ticket on that plane. This is all nonsense. And then you're sat on the plane, and then you're out there, and then when you're out there, you're introduced to everyone, and it's like the higher up the ladder you go in terms of working with promotions, the more professional it is. So normally, you know, like sometimes you'll turn up at a show and they won't even know that you're supposed to be there, or they haven't set any room to one side for you. And my first show with Ring of Honor, it's like, oh look, here's everyone from the bottom up. This is James, and I'm being introduced, which was absolutely lovely. And then, you know, there's like, here's your space, and we've cornered it off for you, and someone's going to go and get the talent for you. That never happens. That shouldn't happen to me. I'm absolutely overwhelmed and honoured to do this because it is the dream. The dream is to find something you enjoy doing and find a way to get someone to pay you to do it.
I think you just brought us to the natural close of episode 52, my friend.
That was my go home.
Yeah, man, you went home strong, and not only are you kind of bringing a close to this episode, but a full year of Chocolate Croissants.
Well, you deserve a golf clap of admiration, a round of applause from me here in the UK. 1 year's a hell of an achievement. I know. I've started a YouTube channel and I'm struggling to get to double figures and keep on schedule. So to do a year, bravo to you and all of your team over there.
I appreciate that. As we limp to the finish line, as my partners Justin and Matt are off doing other things in the world. But again, the strength of collaboration, the strength of vision, and as you said, this was a dream that we had, and no one but ourselves would have prevented us from achieving it.
Exactly, and I think, is this not a theme that's coming back to you in all your podcasts, that you're in charge of your destiny and you've got to do it?
Of course it is, yeah. And because at the end of the day, I mean, it's not your dad or your mom's dream, or your teachers or the culture or the presidents. Like, it's yours because they're not going to do it for you. They're not going to live it for you. And you, my friend, are living proof of that. And which is why and I'll speak on behalf of Matt and Justin, because they're very well aware of your story. We're honored to have had the privilege to share your story to our audience and the world.
I'm delighted to be asked. Thank you very much.
Yeah, dude. So a week from now, we'll be in New Orleans together.
Whoop whoop! Can't wait. Oh,
right?
Jazz bars and food and whiskey and wrestling, and it's going to be awesome. I cannot wait. I've heard so many good things about New Orleans.
It's where I chose to spend my 30th birthday.
Was it really?
If that means anything.
That's it. And it's not, is it New Orleans, not New Orleans? I try and pronounce every vowel in it. I shouldn't do that, should I?
Maybe just stick with NOLA.
NOLA.
There you go. There you go. I think you can slice that 6 different ways.
Fantastic.
But that is where I will see you next in person. So I'm looking forward to that. And dude, like, the internet's crazy, and technology, like what we just recorded, will live forever. And someone 6 years from now will listen to it, and I guarantee will be inspired by your story and hopefully execute on whatever makes them feel most alive. So thank you in advance for providing that gift.
That means a lot. It's a total pleasure. Thank you.
Hey guys, Jordan here. One last time, if you hadn't had enough of me, to close out episode 52. Real quick, thanks again to James Musselwhite. I had a really nice time chatting with him. I look forward to seeing him this weekend in New Orleans. And check the episode notes either on the website or on your podcast app right now to find all the different ways that you can connect with James online. Again, portraitofawrestler.com is his home base on the internet. If you noticed, we had a lot of questions from our friends in the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/chocolate croissants. That is our home base on the internet for chocolate croissants. We're nearing 1,700 members. For me, it is the coolest thing, the most rewarding thing about this entire project, just to connect with so many people around the world. It's a private group for a reason. That way we can create a safe space to help each other, to communicate with each other, and to feel connected to each other as well. It's very inspiring. So if you'd like to join, click the button. We'll accept you, and then feel free to jump into the conversations. Also, Chocolate Croissants, whatever podcatcher you have, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, Google Play, there's dozens of them. If you search Chocolate Croissants, there should be a subscribe button. If you do that, it helps us and it can help you. That way, when you're asleep Sunday night and connected to Wi-Fi, it will automatically download into your phone, and then you won't have to use your data when you're driving to work or working out in the gym or whatever you may be doing on Monday morning. Again, every single Monday morning, we've been doing this for a year straight. So next week, Matt, Justin, and I will be together. We will be celebrating 1 year of Chocolate Croissants. We will be including those in the Facebook group. So today or tomorrow is an opportune time to join the group, and you can be part of what will be a celebration of 1 year of this project. We can't do it without you. We couldn't have done it without you. That would be pretty lonely and kind of miserable to have done it in a vacuum, just the 3 of us recording audio and then sharing it with ourselves. Why I take it to a dark place like that, I don't know, but I kind of like it. Anyway, thanks again. We're so grateful for your attention for this episode and every episode. We will be here next week. We're still going. The train rolls on. Come join us. Has anyone seen that new Wes Anderson film, The Dogs? I'm interested. Let me know in the Facebook group. All right. Rode, one last time, rode.com. I'm using their microphone right now. Much love to them. Much love to you. And until next week for episode 53, bye-bye.